Welcome to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where we sit down with the people who give shape, texture, and voice to life on the North Fork of Long Island. Some are rooted here by generations, others arrived by chance or choice, but all carry with them a piece of the story. We talk about what's changing, what's worth holding on to, and the currents of history, both quiet and loud, that run through this place. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 149, we sit down with Liz Gillooly, a Southold Town Trustee whose life has been shaped by both deep local roots and a love of the sea. Liz grew up sailing from a young age, a passion that took her across oceans and into a career as a charter captain before she returned home to build her own women-led business, Layla Sailing, right here in Greenport. Her path from the water to public service reflects a commitment not only to the environment, but also to the community and the culture of the North Fork. Alongside her work as a trustee, Liz is also active with the North Fork Arts Center and other civic initiatives, connecting her dedication to preservation, sustainability, and creativity. So I hope you enjoy episode 149 with Liz Gillooly. This episode was recorded July 22nd, 2025. Thank you so much for coming on the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be invited onto this wonderful podcast.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
And so just in the beginning, I usually like to start off if you can give us a little introduction about yourself, where you were born and raised?
So I wasn't born here. I grew up in New Jersey, but I've been coming out to the North Fork since I was a newborn. My first summer jobs were out here. I worked at farm stands. I worked at the Orient ice cream parlor. And some of my oldest friendships are with people I've met in Orient. So I always say I wasn't raised here. I wasn't born here, but I was sort of raised here. I grew up here. One funny story is that I snuck into Greenport school with my best friend, Bridget Caffrey, one day because our vacation schedules didn't line up and we just wanted to hang out. So I ended up getting kicked out of school that day because they realized I didn't belong. But sneaking into school isn't something people usually do. And I'm sure you couldn't get away with it today.
Yes, definitely. And then so looking back at your ancestry, does it go back here, or is that also in New Jersey?
So yeah, my family was from New Jersey, but I am the fourth generation of like summer person who is coming out here. So my great grandparents rented a house in Orient, and so my dad came out as a young kid, and brought us out as well. So. My dad lost both of his parents as a teenager, and my mom's dad passed away when she was young. So there are gaps in our oral history of the family, but I'm now raising the first generation to live here full time. So I just had a son. His name is Oliver, and so he's 4 months old, and he'll be living here full time. Yeah. Nice.
And did you get to meet any? I mean, you mentioned that your his parents.
Both of his parents had passed away by the time he was a teenager. So I didn't get to meet those grandparents. He actually had a what's it called? A stepmother.
Okay.
So I had a grandma Dot who was not biologically related, but she was around until I was about 5 years old.
Okay.
And then my mom's mother is still alive, and she's 96 and lives in the Jersey Shore. And she's doing great, but she's the only grandparent that I've known biologically.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then in terms of your parents, what were they like, and what did they do for a living as well?
So my father was in commercial real estate, and my mom stayed home with us for a long time. She ultimately became an aide to a senator in New Jersey. And so that was sort of the first time I learned a little bit about politics and how things are done. But both of my parents are incredibly generous and community-minded people. And so I think In Orient, people always knew that they could just stop by the house and borrow my dad's truck and stuff like that. They've always just been people who saw the value of community and reached out to people and would offer their shirt off their back. So I think that was what we were raised with, was knowing how important it is to be involved in community, to know your neighbors, and to be a good citizen of the world. So yes. I think that's part of what I grew up with. And I was lucky because my parents, the house that my dad introduced us to in Orient is something that he purchased in his 20s after a real estate sale. It was 7 buildings on the water, and he bought it when he was in his 20s for $60,000. Wow. And people thought that he overpaid for it at the time. So it was that property now is such a gem in Orient, and I'm so lucky that, I'm thinking about this summer, I'm going to be able to bring my son down to the beach and share new memories with the next generation on the beach in Orient, right by the yacht club, which is just a beautiful thing. Yes. To continue.
But your dad always came out, would he come out as a child?
Yes. So he came out and spent his summers here. Oh, okay. And, it was funny because where we were from in New Jersey is a suburb of New York City, and most people would go down the shore to the Jersey Shore. And so it was a little odd, in school we would talk about Orient, and, people thought we were talking about the Far East. They were like, where are you going? Orient, never heard of it. And it just was really rare to have people going out to Long Island from New Jersey when pretty much everybody went down the shore, which we never really did because we had this gem of a place, and we always loved how different it was from where we lived in New Jersey.
Yes. And then you started sailing at 8. Was that even out here or in New Jersey? And what also drew you to the water at such a young age?
So I started sailing at 8 at the Orient Yacht Club, and I was drawn to it because, I've always been drawn to the water. My mom jokes that she would put us all in our car seats on the boat when we were really little, and she also taught each of us how to drive the boat so that we could be occupied while she sunbathed, basically. And that was back when sunbathing was more a part of the culture. And so she, my mom and dad really loved being on the water, and we had power boats. But our proximity to the Orient Yacht Club is really why we got into sailing. My parents weren't sailors. And as soon as I learned the fundamentals of sailing, I thought it was the most relaxing, peaceful, quiet, wonderful thing. And the Orient Yacht Club program at the time was really pushing people towards racing, which wasn't really something that I was drawn to. So I dropped out of the sailing program and just would take out club boats with my friends and eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and drink lemonade and have the time of my life sailing over to Long Beach or just relaxing on the boat. And meanwhile, my older sister, Lauren, she took the racing very seriously. She went to Boston College and raced in college. She became an All-American sailor, won a national championship, and she was really the sailor of the family. So we always laughed that I ended up choosing sailing as a career, and Lauren's now in finance. So yeah, it was kind of unexpected.
Was that even something coming out of high school that you knew you wanted to do, or were you thinking of other
So
things?
Coming out of high school, I decided to take a gap year and I went traveling. I backpacked through, first I moved up to Boston where my sisters were in school, and I lived on a couch for a while and got a job as a waitress to make some money. And then I flew down to Nicaragua and did some backpacking and traveled from Nicaragua through Honduras and Guatemala. And I think once I discovered traveling, all I could think of was, how can I make this sustainable? How can I make a career traveling? and actually, sailing came to mind as something that could help fund traveling. And I ended up going back to school temporarily and studied for a while, but then I was offered a position when I was 19 years old. I was working at Scrimshaw in Greenport, and there was a boat tied up to the dock all summer, and they were looking for an extra person to join them as they were sailing down to the Virgin Islands. So I decided to take another semester off, and I jumped on that boat and I sailed down to the Virgin Islands with them. I was only supposed to take a semester off, but I spent 4 years living down in the Virgin Islands.
Wow.
And I learned all about sailing. I met some great mentors, and I ended up getting my captain's license while I lived down there as well.
Wow. Were there any particular or like interesting stories or that really stick with you through that time?
Through that time, I think that, moving to the Virgin Islands from, coming from where I was in New Jersey, which is really, again, like a suburb of New York City, where everybody was very career-oriented, success, like driven, all this stuff. And I moved down to the Virgin Islands where the way of life was just very laid back and relaxed. People would work enough so that they could enjoy their days off. And, it was just a mindset shift. And so I think being there during those formative years, really college age years, made me feel more connected to the environment. It made me feel more connected to people, and just like experiences of life. And so that, I think, is what stuck with me the most. Also, getting my captain's license, and I was fortunate to work for 2 really strong female captains at the time. And this is why representation really does matter, because I could see myself doing what they were doing. And so it was a career path that sort of happened upon me. And it wasn't something that I had thought about doing for a long time. But once I saw it as a possibility, I definitely wanted to go after it.
Yes. And so was this was when you were as a charter captain in the Caribbean?
Yeah, so I started out as a first mate, and I actually never captained a boat down in the Virgin Islands, because as soon as I had gotten my license, I decided I wanted to put my resume up on some, I think it was called findacrew.com, and I ended up finding a boat that was sailing across the Atlantic going over to Spain, and they needed a first mate. And so with my new credentials in hand, I applied, got the job, and we sailed from St. Thomas over to Antigua, and we first sailed to St. Martin and then Antigua, and we left from there and sailed across the Atlantic over to Spain. So that was a really special time in my life, and 25 days at sea, not connected to the internet, not getting updates about what's happening in the world. It was really a time to read books and learn about, I chose a lot of nautical themed books and learned about explorers that were much braver than I was, sailing across the Atlantic with GPS. And, we had a weather fax that came in every day with the weather pattern. So we had all this extra information, but I was reading about captains like Ernest Shackleton, who traveled down to Antarctica, and just the sheer adventure of it all was really something that I was drawn to, and it was great to learn about it in that setting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you mentioned being mentored with other women, but was that something at the time that in your 20s, just seeing that the industry was more predominantly male-dominated, but seeing women in those roles was important to you? Yes.
Yeah. It was a very male-dominated industry. I would say that it still is. And what was so interesting to me is I worked on one sailboat. It was called Kikoa. And we had a female captain, Margie Cox, who led us. And we had a group of friends, all women, who worked on the boat. And I remember we heard pushback from some of the male captains saying like, oh yeah, well, they look great in bathing suits, but what's going to happen if there's a real emergency and stuff like that? And it was just so sexist and so incorrect at the time. And it just, you could feel how people just would push back on it. And even on my own boat, since I started Layla Sailing, I've had people come down to the dock and say things like, oh, when does the captain arrive? And it's like, yes. Well, I'm the captain. So yes. You don't expect that kind of pushback, but it still exists in that industry, I would say.
Yes. And then I guess, I don't know if we're skipping, but like coming back from the 4 years in the Caribbean, and then what led you to start Layla Sailing?
Yeah, so after I left the Caribbean and I spent that summer in the Mediterranean, I then came back home. I worked a summer at the Orient Yacht Club as the steward. And then I ended up moving out to Hawaii and worked on charter boats out there, particularly for a charter company called Trilogy. And that was a really great experience as well. But then I finally decided it was time to move back home and be closer to family. And I met Pat Mundis, who I think I had met before, but she really became a mentor to me. And she took me under her wing and gave me a lot of confidence to start captaining, as like fully using my license for the first time, because I had the license for a while, but I wanted to continue to gain experience before I took on the responsibility of actually driving the boats. And so I was fortunate to work under Pat, and she handed me the keys to the boat and said, here you go, you got to do it. And she really pushed me out of my comfort zone, and I thank her so much for that. And so I worked for her for 4 years. And then after that, I saw this as a career for me. So I decided to start my own sailing business. And so that's when I bought Layla and started my own company. So
wow.
Yeah, that was 6 years ago now. Yeah.
And were you interested in were you interested in coming to the North Fork at that time, or like the area attracted you?
Yeah, so by that time, my whole family had moved out here full time. We had let go of all of our Jersey roots, and my dad had moved full time into his house in Orient, and my mom had, at that time, she owned a house separately in Orient on Narrow River Road. And so that's where everybody was. My brother was also living in Orient at the time. My two sisters had flown the coop. One was in Connecticut and one was in California. But for our little home base, Orient was the place to be. So my dad had an apartment above the garage, and that's where I was for a long time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was just curious if you could talk a bit about how the business has been going, Layla Sailing.
Yeah, the business, well, I will say that I started the business in 2019, and we had a great first season. It was really nice. And then the pandemic hit in 2020, and I just didn't know what would happen. So I was very nervous that, we'd have to shut down. I think it was such an anxious time for everybody. Nobody really knew what was coming next. But what ended up happening was we were able to provide sort of a safe outdoor activity for people. And so, people were being given guidance to go outdoors and to sit 6 feet away from anybody and to stay in your family pod or whatever. And at the time, we only take 6 passengers. So we could take 6 people, put them up on the bow, and we'd be about 35 feet away from them so they could take their masks off, be outside and do something. And it was one of our best seasons, actually, because people were really searching for something to do, to get out of the house and to still feel safe. And we were really felt good that we were able to provide that environment for people and keep it safe as well.
Definitely. And so in terms of moving towards your role as one of the Southold Town trustees, was there a particular moment or experience that pulled you towards public service or running for this position?
Yeah, I think that around that same time in 2020, I was feeling super anxious with COVID. I was feeling angry about the murder of George Floyd. I was feeling frustrated with the way political conversations were unfolding with my friends and family and neighbors. I felt like we were all sort of talking past each other and trying to prove points and not really connecting with each other. And so I realized that instead of getting in fights on the internet with my neighbors and friends, what I really wanted to do was to channel that energy that I had into something more productive. So I joined the Southold Justice Review and Reform Task Force and the Suffolk County Sheriff Department's Community Advisory Board, where I served and got really involved in some police reform, and I think we did really valuable work there and strengthened, the commitment that Southold has to justice for all. And it wasn't that there was an issue at the time in Southold, but it was more of a preventative look at, how can we make sure that a tragedy like what happened to George Floyd never happens here? And I think it was a good use of bringing the community together and to channeling our energy into positive steps just to prevent anything like that from happening. So I really, through that, I started to attend more of the town board meetings, and I started to see how much could be done at a local level. And when I learned more about the trustees and their environmental responsibilities, it felt like a perfect fit for my skills and passions and everything that I had learned about the water, and really what made this place so special to me and why I wanted to live here full time was the connection to nature. So the role of the trustees is to preserve that feeling here in Southold, the feeling that's a little different from everywhere else that I've lived. So
yes.
Yeah.
And what do you see as the biggest environmental or development issues facing Southold right now, and how are you hoping to address them in a second term?
So I said this the first time I was running, and I'll probably be saying this, until I'm blue in the face, but obviously climate change is the biggest threat for all of us. We're seeing ocean temperature rise, acidification, stronger storms. We're seeing sea level rise. All of that is kind of like the big scary thing that's on the horizon, and something that we have to certainly keep our eyes on and do whatever we can to mitigate those realities on a local level. But day to day, we're also facing more immediate threats like the overdevelopment along the waterfront and the unnecessary removal of trees that change the character of our town. In my next term, I'd like to continue pushing for smart policies that protect our coastlines and support sustainable development. I've worked really hard to make code updates to our existing code, to make the code a little bit more user-friendly, so that when you own a house in the trustee jurisdiction and you go to look at the code, you can understand how to apply to us and really spell it all out so that it's a little bit more accessible and you don't feel like you have to hire an expensive expediter just to get a simple patio done or something like that. So that's something I've worked really hard on. But I'd also like to increase education and outreach. I think a lot of people want to do the right thing, but they need the tools and the context to do it. So I applaud you for having all of the trustee candidates here on the podcast, because I think this really helps to start the conversation about what is a trustee and what exactly are they doing and why is it important. And so, yeah, outreach and education is definitely something that I'd like to continue in the next term if I'm lucky enough to get a chance to serve again.
Yes. And I was curious, just for your job, do you have to go out to different properties and talk with owners and about erosion and other issues that might be going on with the property? Is it hard to balance the property rights of the owner while also making sure that the environment is protected at the same time?
Absolutely. I would say that's the biggest challenge of the job, is to try to strike the right balance between what's good for the property owner and what's good for the community and the environment. And often those are at a head, but we tried to find the most reasonable solutions. And oftentimes, we're suggesting things that a homeowner can do that will help shore up their property so that they can protect it. So we do come across a lot of people who really appreciate the work that we do and understand the value of wanting to make sure the erosion doesn't get any worse and wanting to make sure that the runoff from their lawn is really filtered through some natural vegetation so that we're not adding more nitrates to our local bays. And people even see the value of upgrading their septic systems, even though it's a costly thing to do. It's protecting that waterway so that your kids can swim there and your grandkids can swim there one day. And so I think that what we've seen on the North Fork through the work of so many incredible trustee boards is that preservation has worked. And it's why we don't have a lot of local areas that are closed for swimming, because we have done a lot of work to protect our waters, and that is really valuable. The thing about the trustees is we deal with everything within 100 feet of the wetlands, and so we deal with waterfront homeowners. We're not interacting as regularly with people who live inland. But the truth about what we're doing is that all of these decisions affect every single person who lives in Southold Town. So your ability to go down to any of these road ends and just go for a swim, it's dependent on the work that we do with those waterfront properties and the ones that are adjacent to freshwater wetlands as well. So I see the work as super important. I think that it can be challenging for a homeowner to accept that there's additional guidelines for them, but being a good steward for the environment is part of what makes this place special. It's part of what we all need to do for each other.
Yes. And then you've also been deeply involved with the North Fork Arts Center while working with your civic duties. Could you talk a little bit first about how the opportunity came about for you to work for the North Fork Arts Center?
Yeah, sure. So I was very actively involved in helping to save the Arts Center. So Tony Spiridakis, who you've had here on the podcast, he's my stepfather. Yes. And so when this idea to save the Arts Center came about, Tony was really the driving force, and I was behind the scenes helping to make little pledge forms and social media posts and help to spread the communications, to track all the donations, and to do a lot of the legwork and administrative stuff behind the scenes. And so I've been deeply involved since the beginning, and just so proud of the fact that we were able to save the Arts Center and have a cultural beacon in the center of Greenport, where it could have been turned into a hotel, or it could have been knocked down and, who knows what, turned into a parking lot. So I think it's such a wonderful thing to get to be a part of that. And I'm just so proud that I'm the director of operations there, and I've been out on a maternity leave for the last 3 months, but I start again tomorrow. So I'm very excited to get back into that role and to continue to, bring interesting and culturally relevant programming to the North Fork and to make sure that it's accessible to all the people in our community. Yes.
And also, even when you were helping Tony with the process, were you expecting that outcome in terms of the money that was donated and getting the center up and running within that year? Was that surprising?
I think it was such an ambitious goal in our minds to raise $1 million to save the Arts Center. It seemed crazy at the time, and it seemed so out there that it was like, if we can pull this off, we're absolutely going to dedicate ourselves to it. But it didn't seem like a sure thing in any stretch of the imagination. But as we started fundraising, we were blown away quickly. And I think that within the first month, we knew that we would reach the goal because we saw some of these bigger donations coming in, and we saw the community just so engaged in what we were doing and really feeling the same sort of passion that we felt for saving it. So I think, at first we were very surprised, and then once we reached the goal, and of course at the beginning it was all pledged money. So first we said we hadn't even gotten our nonprofit status yet, so we could only say, okay, if we save it, will you donate? And so people filled out all these pledge forms, and then we reached $1 million, and then we had to convert the pledges into actual donations after we had received the nonprofit status. But it was shocking to us that we reached that many pledges before we even got our status. So, yes. But I think that the thing that's so amazing about it, having almost 1,000 donors in the first push, was that it wasn't just big donations. It was people who were writing us a check for $25. And what that meant to us was that if we do this, we have people in the community who are going to show up for our programming. We have people who are basically voting for this with their dollars, saying, this is something that's important to us. And so rather than having, 10 giant donors and an empty theater half the year, we are seeing that we're able to fill seats with people who really value the programming. And so that means a lot.
Definitely. And then just even with all these roles that you have, how do you juggle with the North Fork Arts Center, captain, trustee, a mother now? How do you juggle all these roles and connect them, or how do they connect for you as well?
Yeah, well, to me, it all feels connected. It's about protecting what makes this place feel vibrant and meaningful, whether it's the bay, the shoreline, or the stories that we're telling on screen. And everything that I'm doing is to help raise my son in a place that is even better for him. this summer I am taking the season off of sailing. I've decided that, this is my son's first summer of life and I want to be as present as I can be for that first year. So this summer, hopefully my husband and I will get to go use the boat for fun rather than just for work. And so that'll be really nice. And we've already been enjoying our weekends together more, which I hadn't had a weekend here in over 10 years where I wasn't working in the summer. So it's been really nice. But I will get back to sailing on Layla next summer. And I'm also, one of my crew members is working on getting her captain's license. So it'll be really nice to see that go sort of full circle from me being mentored by all these wonderful female captains to now mentoring the next generation of female captains.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And then what do you think makes the North Fork a place worth protecting, not just environmentally, but culturally and economically?
So where I grew up in New Jersey, it felt like, I think I mentioned this before, but it did feel like wealth and status often dominated the conversation. And the North Fork always felt different, like more grounded, more connected to nature, more about the work and the land than the image of who you are. Where I grew up, kids were driving Mercedes to high school. It was like a strange thing, but it was all about status. And to me, it just has always felt more grounded here. And I think it's vital to preserve that balance between the old and new, between preservation and possibility. And I think it's what makes this place really special. But I never want us to lose that connection to the environment and to feeling like we are a part of the land that surrounds us.
Because I think people have talked on the podcast previously about that, even looking towards the South Fork as another example, but wanting to make sure we do preserve open space and make sure that it's still affordable out here for people, even people that graduate from high school here, which is a challenge that I think everyone or people know about. But I think just moving forward, it's important to keep talking about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think one of the tragedies to me is to see some of my friends that I grew up with moving away from here after generations of living here because they simply can't afford it. And so I think affordable housing and finding ways to keep people here who've grown up here, who are really attached to the land and who have contributed in huge ways to the culture and the society that we live in here. We want to make sure that we can keep them here. So I think looking at more affordable housing and making this place more accessible is something that is very important to me. And it will help to preserve the way of life here if we can preserve the people who have made it that way, and I think that's something that I really hope to see more of. I want the next generation to be able to live and work here, to raise their kids here, and to feel a sense of belonging to this community. I think we lose a lot when we lose entire bloodlines moving down to the South or somewhere else where they can afford to have, the life that they thought they could have here.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think if we can stay focused on equity, sustainability, and community, I think the North Fork has a beautiful future ahead. I think that's so important, and I think it's why people are really drawn to the North Fork. We just have to make sure that we can keep people here. Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And then I think I just had one other question, more so. You mentioned as a trustee making sure to engage younger people about the environment. But what advice would you have for young people, even especially like someone like you that has gotten involved in the community? I know it can be hard juggling a wide range of things in society today, but what advice would you give younger people in the community the hope to get involved, whether through civics or just other organizations, and be a voice for the future?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a great question. So thank you. I will say that, having a baby, I started to look at all of the things that I'm juggling on my plate and to say, like, should I continue? Should I run again for trustee? And what it came down to when I talked to my husband about it is that being a trustee is it's a huge time commitment, but it's something that gives me the most fulfillment. It's something that I really care about, and I see that the work I'm doing makes a difference and can possibly even improve my child's future here on the North Fork. So I will say that, of course, getting involved sometimes sounds like it's just going to take all your time away and you already feel stretched too thin. But what you get from it is more of a connection to the community, more interesting conversations with your neighbors, and the sense of fulfillment knowing that what you're doing is contributing. And it really is, it's the best feeling in the world to me.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think we covered everything. Were there any other last minute things you wanted to discuss or say that we haven't talked about?
I just want to say, you know, for everybody listening to this podcast and who've listened to a lot of these podcasts, I think that it's such a wonderful service what you're providing. You're documenting a moment in time for people here on the North Fork who have contributed in all different ways. And I think it's such a testament to this wonderful community that we have to see the wide range of people who are involved. And it's really heartening to hear these stories about people who care so much about our community and want to make it a better place, including you. And so I really appreciate all of it. And I look forward to hearing more of these.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Thanks.
No, but I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast today and share your story and your continued involvement in the community moving forward. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. And happy Pride. Today's Pride Day in Greenport.
Yes, happy Pride.
Thanks.
Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 149 with Liz Gillooly. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.